The name is synonymous with terror, mystery, and unsolved crimes. This is the Zodiac Killer. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, Northern California was under siege by a ruthless serial killer. He preyed on couples in secluded areas, shooting them with a .22 caliber firearm. As the body count rose, so did the terror. People were afraid to even leave their homes after dark. But the killer wasn't done yet, and soon he started taunting the police and newspapers with cryptic letters and ciphers, bragging about his crimes, and leaving behind clues that would make him a household name. The Zodiac Killer. While researching the case, we came across some startling facts that will leave you speechless. You won't want to miss this. But before we get into it, remember to give us a thumbs up for more amazing content. Alright, let's begin. What makes the Zodiac case so unique is that the killer left behind several pieces of evidence that could have led to his capture, but somehow he managed to evade the authorities for decades. In fact, he sent a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle that read, "I want to be caught," which only added to the mystery surrounding his case. Was he playing games with the police, or was there something else going on here? After careful examination of the handwriting, the police determined that the letter was indeed written by the killer. But instead of helping the investigation, the letter caused a media frenzy that made the killer famous overnight. Newspapers across the country picked up the story, and people were captivated by the mystery. It seemed like everyone had an opinion on who the killer could be, and theories abounded. It all started when two teenagers were shot in a park. At first, it was just another crime in an already violent city. But then the killer started sending letters to the press, and everything changed. One of the letters contained a strange cipher that read, "I like killing people." When the police realized that they were dealing with a serial killer, they took the case very seriously. They put together a task force to investigate, and every lead was followed up on. But the killer always seemed to be one step ahead of them. As the body count rose, so did the terror. People were afraid to even leave their homes after dark. And the media frenzy reached a fever pitch. The killer had struck again, and this time he had left behind a calling card, a circle with a cross drawn inside. The police knew that they were dealing with a serial killer, and the race was on to catch him before he struck again. But the killer had other plans. He continued to taunt the police with cryptic messages, and the public was terrified. The pressure was on for the police to solve the case and bring the killer to justice. But with each passing day, the mystery only deepened. The case went from bad to worse, and the police were desperate to catch the killer. They put out a call to the public for any information, but the only response they got were false tips and wild theories. But the police weren't giving up. They pored over the evidence again and again, trying to find a connection between the victims or a motive for the crimes. But it seemed like the killer had left no trace behind except for the ominous circle with a cross. Time was running out. The killer was still on the loose, and the public was starting to panic. The police knew that they needed to make an arrest soon, or the body count would rise even higher. Under pressure, they decided to go with their gut and arrested a suspect. But as it turned out, this was just a red herring. The real killer was still out there laughing at their efforts. The public was outraged, and the police were humiliated. But they were determined to get to the bottom of this case once and for all. They went back to the beginning, re-interviewing witnesses and dusting off old evidence. Slowly but surely, they started to piece together a profile of the killer. They learned that he was a white male, around 25 to 35 years old, and had a job. But beyond that, they had nothing. The search continued, and the police were desperate to catch a break. They put out a composite sketch of the killer, hoping that someone, somewhere, had seen him. But the only response they got were more false tips and more theories. The public was on edge, and the police were out of options. Suddenly a witness came forward and said she had seen the killer. She described him in detail, down to the clothes he was wearing. The police were ecstatic, and this new lead finally seemed promising. With this new information, the police were able to track down a suspect. They brought him in for questioning, but as it turned out, he was innocent. The killer was still out there, and the police were back at square one. But they weren't giving up. They continued to follow every lead, no matter how small, and eventually they uncovered a surprising piece of information. The killer had used a phone booth to call the newspaper and give them the key to one of his ciphers. This was a major breakthrough. The police now had a physical object linked directly to the killer. All they had to do was track down where he made the call from. Following this lead, the police were able to narrow down the list of suspects. They were getting close. But the killer wasn't done yet. He continued to taunt the police and the public with cryptic messages, and the pressure was on to catch him before he struck again. The police worked tirelessly, following every lead and interviewing every possible suspect, but the killer seemed to be one step ahead of them. Then, out of nowhere, the killer stopped. He didn't send any more letters or claim any more victims. The public was relieved, but the police were suspicious. They knew that the killer hadn't gotten away with all of the evidence against him. They just needed to keep searching until they found the connection that would link him to the crimes. But it wasn't easy. The killer had left almost no trace behind, except for a few disturbing letters. The police were baffled. They had all the evidence they needed to convict the killer, but they just couldn't put it all together. Was the killer hiding in plain sight? Had he changed his identity and moved away? Or was he lying dead somewhere, his true identity lost forever? As the years passed, the case went from a top priority to a cold one. The public moved on and the killer faded into obscurity. But some detectives never gave up hope. They continued to follow leads and interview witnesses, hoping that one day they would finally catch the killer. The Zodiac case remained unsolved for decades, but in recent years, new evidence has surfaced that may finally bring the killer to justice. DNA testing has been used to link him to some of the crimes, and investigators are confident that they are on the right track. But despite all the progress that has been made, the killer's identity remains a mystery. To this day, the Zodiac case continues to fascinate and terrify people around the world. The killer's audacity, intelligence, and sheer evil continue to baffle law enforcement officials and the general public alike. And while the case may never be fully solved, the search for answers continues. So what do you think? Do you believe that the killer was ever caught? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more updates. Thank you for watching Silent Mystery Vault. If you enjoyed this journey into one of history's darkest mysteries, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon so you never miss another story from the vault. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, some secrets are never meant to be solved.